It's very hard to keep up, particularly when you try to dash about the country as well.
There are confessions so devastating that even the ancient walls of Buckingham Palace seem unable to keep them buried forever, and according to reports now sending shockwaves through royal media circles, one such confession may have finally emerged from the private world of King Charles III, because palace insiders claim that at 78, after decades of silence, duty, scandal, and carefully controlled public appearances, King Charles may have finally admitted a heartbreaking truth about Princess Diana that many suspected for years, but few ever believed would be spoken aloud by the king himself. And if those reports are true, then the greatest fairy tale in modern royal history may never have been a love story at all. Witnesses close to recent private conversations now claim that long-serving staff inside Buckingham Palace were left visibly shaken after hearing what was allegedly discussed behind closed doors, because according to those familiar with the atmosphere surrounding the king, this was not another carefully measured reflection on duty, legacy, or public service. And this was not another polished royal statement designed to protect the image of the monarchy, but something far more personal, far more painful, and far more dangerous to the history of the House of Windsor, because insiders now whisper that King Charles III may have privately acknowledged that from the very beginning of his marriage, from the very moment Princess Diana walked toward him beneath the towering dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, King Charles already knew Princess Diana was not the woman King Charles truly loved. Now stop for a moment and ask yourself something. If the future King of Britain already knew his heart belonged somewhere else, if the most photographed wedding of the century was built not on love, but on obligation, and if a 19-year-old Princess Diana entered that marriage believing she had found her prince, then what exactly was Princess Diana walking into? Because according to royal historians, former correspondents, and insiders who have spent decades studying the emotional fractures hidden behind royal ceremony, the answer may be darker than anyone imagined. To understand how this story truly began, you have to go back to the early 1980s, long before King Charles III wore a crown, long before Queen Camilla stood beside the throne, and long before Prince William and Prince Harry would grow up carrying the emotional weight of a marriage that many now believe was broken before it even began, because at 33, Prince Charles was no longer simply a man looking for love. Prince Charles was a royal deadline. Inside the private corridors of Buckingham Palace, pressure was reportedly building from every direction. Pressure from advisors, pressure from tradition, pressure from 1,000 years of monarchy demanding continuity, demanding heirs, demanding stability, and, according to several royal biographies, by that point Prince Charles was no longer being asked whether Prince Charles wanted to marry. Prince Charles was being told it was time. And yet, according to those same accounts, Prince Charles's heart remained emotionally tied to one woman, Queen Camilla. Long before cameras, scandals, interviews, and public controversy transformed Queen Camilla into one of the most debated figures in modern royal history, sources suggest Camilla had already become something deeply personal to Prince Charles, not simply a companion, not simply an attraction, and not simply a youthful romance, but a presence, a confidant, a private emotional refuge in a life defined by public expectation. And insiders now claim that even as royal advisors searched for the perfect bride, even as names circulated through aristocratic circles, and even as pressure mounted behind closed doors, Prince Charles never truly let Queen Camilla leave his heart. And that is where Princess Diana entered the story. Young, elegant, innocent, beautiful, connected to one of Britain's most respected aristocratic families. And, according to palace observers, almost politically perfect. When Diana Spencer first entered royal circles, the public saw a dream. The press saw a future princess. The monarchy saw renewal. But according to reports now resurfacing from royal insiders, King Charles III may have seen something entirely different. Not a soulmate. Not a great love. Not the woman who understood the quiet loneliness of royal life, but a solution, a symbol, a sacrifice. And if that sounds harsh, what allegedly happened in the final weeks before the royal wedding may be even more heartbreaking, because according to reports that have circulated for years through royal media circles, Princess Diana may have already begun sensing something was wrong long before the cameras rolled, long before the carriage procession and long before the balcony kiss that convinced millions they were witnessing the beginning of a fairy tale. Because insiders now claim Princess Diana allegedly discovered signs that another woman still occupied the emotional center of Prince Charles's world. A name, a gift, a private call, a symbol hidden where it should never have been. And what Princess Diana reportedly found next may have shattered Princess Diana's heart before the marriage had even begun. By the final weeks before the wedding that would captivate billions, according to royal insiders who have spent decades piecing together the hidden emotional history of the House of Windsor, the polished fairy tale that newspapers, television networks, and palace communications teams were preparing to sell to the world was already beginning to fracture behind closed doors. Because while the public saw a glowing young Princess Diana stepping gracefully into the role of Britain's future princess, smiling for cameras, charming reporters, and appearing every bit the innocent royal bride the monarchy so desperately needed, sources now claim that inside the private apartments, inside the quiet hallways, and inside the heavily guarded emotional world of King Charles III, something far darker was already unfolding. According to several royal accounts that have resurfaced in recent years, Princess Diana was not naive enough to ignore what Princess Diana was beginning to feel, because even at 19, despite the glamour, despite the diamonds, despite the endless photographers and carefully staged engagements, Diana reportedly began sensing an invisible presence inside the relationship, a shadow that seemed to follow every conversation, every silence, every distant glance, and every emotionally hollow interaction with the man Diana was about to marry, and according to palace insiders, that shadow had a name: Queen Camilla. Now imagine what that must have felt like. You are 19 years old. You are preparing for the most watched wedding on earth. The entire world believes you are living a fairy tale. And yet somewhere deep inside, you begin realizing the man standing beside you may already belong to someone else. Would you walk away? Would you ask questions? Or would you convince yourself that love will come later? Because according to those familiar with the emotional reality behind royal life, Princess Diana reportedly chose hope. And that may have been the beginning of everything. Sources now claim that one of the most devastating moments came when Diana allegedly discovered a gift that Prince Charles had reportedly prepared in secret, a gift that was never intended for Diana, never meant for the future princess, and never meant to be seen by anyone outside Prince Charles's private world. And according to accounts repeated for decades by royal correspondents, the object allegedly carried initials so personal, so emotionally revealing, and so impossible to misunderstand, that Diana reportedly stood frozen the moment Princess Diana realized what it meant. Not duty, not friendship, not history, love. And not love for Diana. Love for Queen Camilla. Reports suggest that when Princess Diana quietly confronted the emotional weight of what Princess Diana had allegedly discovered, the young future princess did not storm through palace corridors, did not publicly challenge Prince Charles, and did not expose what Princess Diana was feeling to the world, because according to insiders, Diana did something far more heartbreaking. Princess Diana stayed silent. Princess Diana smiled for cameras. Princess Diana attended fittings. Princess Diana waved at crowds. Princess Diana rehearsed the role of a future queen while privately beginning to understand that the love story everyone around Princess Diana was celebrating may never have existed at all. And if that was not already devastating enough, what allegedly happened just days before the ceremony may reveal how deeply the emotional divide had already taken root, because according to multiple accounts from individuals close to palace operations during that period, King Charles III reportedly continued maintaining private communication with Queen Camilla even as the royal wedding approached. And sources claim those conversations were not formal, not political, and not ceremonial, but deeply personal, emotionally intimate, and perhaps the only moments when Prince Charles reportedly felt genuinely understood. Now, ask yourself something. If the future king was still reaching for another woman days before the wedding, what exactly was Princess Diana walking toward? A marriage? A duty? Or an emotional sacrifice arranged by an institution that needed an image more than it needed truth? Because according to royal historians, by July 29, 1981, When the doors of St. Paul's Cathedral opened and Princess Diana stepped into one of the most iconic bridal moments in modern history, the public saw beauty, innocence, and destiny, but inside the heart of King Charles III, sources now claim something entirely different was happening. Not excitement, not passion, not emotional certainty, regret. Because according to insiders who have studied Prince Charles's body language during that ceremony for decades, even while reciting vows before the world, Prince Charles reportedly appeared emotionally distant, controlled, almost disconnected. And some royal observers have long believed that behind those measured expressions stood a man performing the most important duty of Prince Charles's life, while privately mourning the love Prince Charles believed could never stand beside the throne. And while millions watched the balcony kiss at Buckingham Palace and believed they were witnessing the beginning of a royal fairy tale, insiders now claim that inside the emotional reality of that marriage, the heartbreak had already begun. But what Princess Diana allegedly discovered after the honeymoon, inside the cold private rooms of Kensington Palace, would leave Princess Diana questioning whether King Charles III had ever truly chosen Princess Diana at all. When the final celebrations faded, when the cheers beneath the balcony of Buckingham Palace slowly disappeared into the London night, and when the cameras that had followed every smile, every wave, and every carefully choreographed royal gesture finally turned away, according to palace insiders who later described those first months with visible discomfort, Princess Diana stepped into what the world believed was the beginning of a fairy tale, only to discover that behind the golden gates, behind the polished marble corridors, and behind the centuries of royal tradition, the marriage Princess Diana had entered may already have been emotionally broken in ways no 19-year-old bride could ever have been prepared to survive. According to those familiar with the private atmosphere inside Kensington Palace during those early years, the first signs did not come through open arguments, dramatic confrontations, or public scandal, because if anything, what unsettled Princess Diana most was silence, long, deliberate, emotionally freezing silence. The kind of silence that slowly convinces a person that something important is missing even when nobody around them is willing to say it aloud, and sources now claim that within weeks of the honeymoon, King Charles III had already begun retreating into routines that left Princess Diana increasingly isolated inside one of the most famous residences in the world. Mornings, according to royal accounts, were often consumed by paperwork, official briefings, correspondence, agricultural planning, environmental projects, and endless preparations connected to royal duty, while afternoons reportedly disappeared into long countryside excursions, private hunting trips, and extended periods away from the emotional center of the marriage. And although these routines may have appeared normal to those raised inside aristocratic tradition, sources suggest that for Princess Diana, who entered royal life still emotionally young, deeply sensitive, and desperately searching for emotional reassurance, the growing distance began to feel less like duty and more like rejection. Now imagine that for a moment. You are the most photographed woman in the world. Millions adore you. Crowds scream your name. The press calls you the future of the monarchy. And yet when the palace doors close, the man you married barely looks at you. What would that do to you? Because according to insiders, that question may explain everything that happened next. Reports now suggest that as the emotional distance between King Charles III and Princess Diana continued growing, Diana began noticing small details that seemed harmless on the surface, but devastating once connected together, details so subtle that nobody outside the marriage would have recognized their significance, yet so emotionally sharp that Diana reportedly could not stop seeing them. A pair of cufflinks, a handwritten note, a familiar perfume, old photographs tucked between private papers, a sudden smile whenever a certain name entered conversation. And according to several royal accounts, every one of those details seemed to point toward the same woman, Queen Camilla. Sources now claim that what began as suspicion soon turned into something far more painful, because according to palace insiders, one quiet afternoon inside Kensington, Princess Diana allegedly passed a partially open study door and heard something Princess Diana was never meant to hear. Not political discussion, not ceremonial planning, not conversations about duty, but tenderness, warmth, softness. a version of King Charles III that Princess Diana herself had never fully received. And according to those accounts, the voice on the other end of that private conversation allegedly belonged to Queen Camilla. Now, ask yourself something. If the person you married gave another person the emotional warmth you spent every day begging to receive, how long before heartbreak becomes something darker? Because according to those close to the emotional history of the royal family, this may have been the moment when Princess Diana stopped trying to become the wife King Charles III wanted, and started questioning whether Prince Charles had ever wanted Princess Diana at all. Reports suggest that after that discovery, the emotional atmosphere inside Kensington became colder than ever because instead of offering comfort, instead of acknowledging Princess Diana's growing distress, and instead of reassuring the young princess that Princess Diana's fears were misplaced, insiders claim King Charles III increasingly responded with criticism about protocol, criticism about emotional control, criticism about public image, and criticism about what Prince Charles reportedly viewed as Princess Diana's growing sensitivity to pressures that royal life was simply expected to endure. And that may have been the beginning of Princess Diana's quiet collapse. Sources now claim that meals became harder, sleep became shorter, anxiety became heavier, public smiles became more practiced. And the radiant young woman who had once entered royal life as the future of the monarchy reportedly began looking into mirrors and wondering whether the crown Princess Diana had gained had quietly cost Princess Diana everything else. But while Princess Diana was slowly breaking behind palace walls, something entirely different was happening beyond them, because out in hospitals, schools, orphanages, and public walkabouts across Britain, crowds were beginning to fall deeply, emotionally, and almost instinctively in love with Princess Diana. And according to palace insiders, that growing public devotion would soon trigger a new and far more dangerous conflict inside the marriage, because for the first time in his life, King Charles III may have realized that the woman Prince Charles never truly chose was becoming the one the entire world could not stop choosing. As the months turned into years and the emotional distance inside the royal marriage continued widening behind the guarded walls of Kensington Palace, according to royal insiders who observed the transformation from both public ceremonies and private corridors, something extraordinary, and for some inside the monarchy, deeply unsettling, began happening to Princess Diana. Because while the young princess may have entered royal life searching for love, searching for emotional security, and searching for a husband who could make the vast and often isolating world of the monarchy feel like home, sources now suggest that the pain Princess Diana experienced behind closed doors began reshaping Princess Diana into something far more powerful than anyone inside the institution had originally anticipated. Not simply a princess. Not simply a royal wife. Not simply the mother of Prince William and Prince Harry, but a global emotional force. And according to palace observers, that transformation may have changed everything. Because as the private marriage between King Charles III and Princess Diana reportedly grew colder, the world outside palace walls began seeing a very different version of Diana, a version built not on fairy tale fantasy, not on ceremonial glamour, and not on aristocratic perfection, but on warmth, compassion, vulnerability, and something many royal historians now describe as emotional authenticity, a quality so rare inside institutions built on formality that it instantly connected Princess Diana to millions of people who felt they were not simply watching a princess, they were watching someone real. Now think about that for a moment. What happens when the woman who feels invisible inside her own marriage suddenly becomes the most visible woman on earth? What happens when the person who cannot find love at home begins receiving it from millions of strangers? And what happens when the future king realizes the world is no longer looking at him, but at her? Because according to insiders familiar with the emotional dynamics of that period, this is where the private pain inside the marriage allegedly evolved into something far more dangerous. Competition. Sources now claim that wherever Princess Diana appeared, whether visiting children in hospitals, comforting patients others were afraid to touch, walking through orphanages, meeting grieving families, or kneeling beside people society often ignored, crowds no longer whispered respectfully. Crowds screamed. Crowds cried. Crowds reached. Crowds called Diana's name with an intensity that reportedly left even seasoned palace staff stunned, and according to royal commentators who studied public footage from those years, there were moments when King Charles III, then still Prince Charles, appeared to notice something deeply uncomfortable unfolding in real time. Not scandal, not disrespect, not rebellion, replacement. Because while Prince Charles continued delivering carefully prepared speeches about architecture, agriculture, environmental policy, and royal responsibility, the cameras, the crowds, and increasingly the emotional loyalty of the public seemed to follow one person: Princess Diana. And according to insiders, that shift allegedly began affecting the marriage in ways neither of them could ignore. Reports now suggest that arguments which once began quietly behind closed doors started becoming sharper, colder, and emotionally more damaging, because according to those familiar with the atmosphere inside Kensington, King Charles III reportedly struggled with what some described as growing resentment, not only toward media attention, not only toward public comparisons, but toward the undeniable reality that the woman Prince Charles may never have fully chosen was becoming the emotional center of the modern monarchy. Now, ask yourself something. If the person you underestimated suddenly becomes the person the entire world cannot stop loving, would that create admiration or jealousy? Because according to palace observers, the answer may explain why the emotional cracks inside the marriage soon became impossible to hide. Sources now claim that by the late 1980s, separate routines, separate schedules, separate tours, and separate emotional worlds had become increasingly common, and although public appearances continued projecting unity, insiders now suggest the private reality looked very different, with Princess Diana increasingly turning outward toward humanitarian work, public compassion, and emotional connection, while King Charles III reportedly retreated deeper into private correspondence, intellectual circles, countryside escapes, and the one relationship that insiders claim had never truly disappeared: Queen Camilla. And if that was not painful enough, what happened next would reportedly push Princess Diana beyond the point of silent endurance, because according to royal insiders, after years of emotional isolation, after years of public smiles masking private heartbreak, and after years of living inside what Princess Diana would later describe as emotional overcrowding, the Princess of Wales allegedly reached a moment where silence no longer felt like dignity. Silence felt like surrender. And according to sources familiar with the emotional history of the royal family, it was during one private interview preparation, one emotionally charged conversation, and one deeply personal decision that Princess Diana allegedly chose to do something no senior royal woman had ever dared to do before. Tell the truth. Not palace truth. Not institutional truth. Not carefully managed royal truth. Personal truth. And when Princess Diana finally decided to speak openly about what had really been happening inside that marriage, what Princess Diana was about to say would not simply shock Britain. It would shake the monarchy itself, devastate King Charles III, and force the entire world to look at the fairy tale of 1981 in a completely different light. Because the next words Princess Diana would speak would become some of the most unforgettable words in royal history. By the time Princess Diana finally sat beneath the bright studio lights, surrounded not by palace advisors, not by carefully controlled royal press officers, and not by the centuries of silence that had protected the House of Windsor for generations, but by cameras, microphones, and the terrifying freedom of telling the truth in Princess Diana's own voice. According to royal insiders who still describe that moment as one of the most emotionally explosive events in modern royal history, the marriage between King Charles III and Princess Diana was no longer quietly breaking behind the guarded walls of Kensington Palace. The marriage was about to break in front of the world. And according to those who witnessed the emotional fallout from inside Buckingham Palace, nobody, absolutely nobody, was prepared for what Princess Diana was about to say. Because when Princess Diana looked into those cameras with a calm, wounded, and unmistakably human honesty that had already made Princess Diana beloved across continents, sources say there was no visible anger, no bitterness, no theatrical performance, and no attempt to destroy the monarchy that had once promised Princess Diana a fairy tale. But there was something far more dangerous.
Truth. Raw.
Personal. unfiltered truth. And then came the words that would echo through royal history for generations. There were 3 of us in this marriage. Now stop for a moment and think about what those words really meant. Not gossip, not rumor, not tabloid speculation, not palace whispers hidden behind velvet curtains, but a direct acknowledgement from Princess Diana herself that inside one of the most watched marriages in modern history, inside the fairy tale millions had celebrated, and inside the institution that symbolized stability, tradition, and moral authority, there had always been another presence. Queen Camilla. And according to insiders, the emotional impact inside Buckingham Palace was immediate. Sources now claim that senior advisors reportedly froze. Private phones allegedly began ringing without pause. Emergency communications meetings were quietly arranged. Long-serving household figures who had spent entire careers protecting royal secrets suddenly realized that one of the most carefully guarded emotional truths in modern monarchy had just been exposed to the entire world by the one person many inside the institution had quietly underestimated for years: Princess Diana. But according to those close to the emotional aftermath, the person reportedly hit hardest by that public truth was not the press office, not palace communications, and not even Queen Camilla. It was King Charles III. Because according to palace observers, for the first time in Prince Charles's life, the carefully controlled image of duty, stability, and emotional restraint that had defined Prince Charles since childhood was suddenly being challenged by something far more powerful than protocol: public sympathy. And not sympathy for Prince Charles. Sympathy for Princess Diana. Now, ask yourself something. What happens when the institution chooses silence, but the people choose truth? What happens when the future king tries to protect the crown, but the world decides to protect the woman the crown never fully protected? Because according to royal commentators, from that moment forward, the emotional center of the monarchy changed forever. Princess Diana was no longer simply a princess. Princess Diana became a symbol of courage, a symbol of emotional survival, a symbol of speaking truth against power. And while public support for Diana soared across Britain, across Europe, across America, and far beyond the walls of the royal family, insiders claim King Charles III found Prince Charles's private world collapsing under the weight of public anger, growing media scrutiny, and the painful realization that the marriage built for duty had become a global lesson in emotional tragedy. Then came the divorce. Then came separation. Then came years of public tension, private guilt, and the emotional burden carried not only by Prince Charles and Princess Diana, but by 2 young princes, Prince William and Prince Harry, who would grow up carrying the silence, the cameras, the headlines, and the scars of a marriage that may never have been built on love at all. And then came Paris. August 1997. The night that changed everything. The night the world lost Princess Diana. And according to those who observed the royal family during those devastating days, something inside King Charles III may never have fully healed. Because now, at 78, with the weight of the crown finally resting on Prince Charles's shoulders, with age replacing ambition, with reflection replacing pressure, and with history looking back harder than ever before, insiders now claim King Charles may have finally chosen to confront the one truth Prince Charles spent decades avoiding: that Princess Diana deserved more. More honesty, more love, more protection, more courage, and perhaps most painfully of all, more truth. So now the question moves to you. If King Charles III truly admitted that Prince Charles never loved Princess Diana the way a husband should have loved a wife, do you see that as courage? Or do you see it as a truth spoken far too late? Share your thoughts below, because your voice matters in this conversation, and if you follow royal history, palace insiders, royal scandals, the future of Prince William, the journey of Prince Harry, and the lasting legacy of Princess Diana, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and join this community, because the next royal story may reveal even more than the palace ever intended.